Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series brought to you this month by Royal Chain. Today's session features Senior Editor of Fashion, Ashley Davis, speaking with Shelley Brown and Alexis Padis about engagement ring trends. Before I turn the discussion over to Ashley and her guests, I just want to let our attendees know that if they have a question, they can drop it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of the screens. I'll be back on after the discussion to share any questions with our panelists. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website next week. Now, I'll let Ashley get things started. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome, ladies. Great to have you here today. So 2022 will see a record-breaking number of weddings as millennials reach prime marrying age and couples reschedule their ceremonies that may have been postponed during the earlier pandemic. Our guest today will help us figure out everything we need to know about the bridal jewelry market. We are so excited to have Shelley Brown back with us today. Shelley is the Knot's senior fashion and beauty editor, keeping up with every wedding trend from New York City. And I'm also excited to welcome Alexis Padis, president of Padis Jewelry and an expert in engagement rings. Padis Jewelry has 5 locations throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, including its Forevermark boutique in Walnut Creek. Thank you for being here today, ladies.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So I thought that we could start just with how couples are shopping for their engagement rings today. So are we still seeing some couples going for the surprise element and shopping solo, or are we seeing a greater percentage of couples shopping together?
I can tell you from the retail side of things, we kind of put our clientele in 3 kind of buckets. And of course, there's always areas in between and somewhere I'm in the middle. But of course, the traditionalist is the guy that wants to come and do this solo, perhaps with the help of a mom or a close friend. And that I would say is kind of the more common route that we, I think, have familiarized ourselves with. But there's 2 other kind of groups that, especially on the sales floor side, we've had to kind of adjust to and really make sure it's a comfortable environment for. The first of which is my personal preference, which is something we call the posse, where it's a group of gals or guys that are coming in and kind of in the exploratory phases, and they want to come in, have a fun time, try a bunch of stuff on, and just have kind of more of that relaxed environment. And of course, if it's a group of 5, that's 5 potential engagement rings or 5 potential wedding bands. So you want to make sure you have the experience that mimics exactly what they're looking for and that they're comfortable with, so that hopefully that turns into sales down the road, because obviously it's not happening that day. And then the third component, and it's one that we've seen a huge rise in, is when couples are now coming in together. So I think the pandemic kind of has accelerated a lot of relationships, and there's couples now that have bought a home together, that may already have a child together, and the ring seems to be sometimes the last part of that equation. And it's not necessarily an engagement ring, it's a commitment ring or something just to signify them as a couple. And it's definitely an adjustment in terms of the sales force side. I love the fact that we get to do kind of the diamond education to the couple, and they get to have that conversation together rather than one over the other getting to prioritize what's important to them. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that get to wear the ring all day, every day. So I'm a big proponent of us also getting a voice in what the engagement ring looks like.
That's so interesting. I love that. I love the idea of the posse.
It's a lot of fun and a lot of champagne.
Are you seeing more male groups in that or more female groups?
On our end, definitely more female groups. So it's almost like a mini bachelorette party that comes in, and it's a whole group of them, and they're all different points of their relationship. But the reconnaissance that gets done is priceless, because the friends all take pictures and take notes for each other and pass them along to significant others down the road, so that that person buying the ring isn't flying blind. They have a little bit of insight as to what looked good on their hands rather than what they just happen to like on Instagram or put on their Pinterest.
Okay. And then in terms of our new normal in the pandemic, what about the way couples are shopping in terms of online, in store, or through virtual Zoom appointments? What are we kind of seeing in that sort of mix?
Yeah, Alexis, you can speak to whether or not you're seeing this in real time from the retail side, but according to the Knott's 2021 Jewelry and Engagement Study, which surveys about 5,000 engaged couples every year, we found that this year in 2021 and probably in 2022 as well, COVID had much less of an overall impact on ring shopping in general. And while online research is still a huge part of the ring shopping process, about 67% of the proposers surveyed purchased their rings in person.
Okay, and that makes sense because also the jewelry industry has been so proactive. I mean, from very early on in the pandemic in, you know, making a clean setting, having masks, just instantly kind of like having everything by appointment or really updating their policies to go along with whatever stage we're in a certain area in the pandemic. So that makes sense because, I mean, it does seem like most people do still want to see that ring, just touch it, hold it. Do you find the same thing, Alexis?
Oh, 100%. And the statistics that Shelley mentioned make 100% sense in terms of what we tend to see. Even the vast majority of our sales do start in some kind of digital format, whether it be they see our Instagram, whether they reach out on our website, whether they go on live chat. But our end goal is, of course, to drive that traffic in store. We very much are mindful of the fact that we want to meet our clients where they're more comfortable being met. So if it does mean Zoom calls, especially through 2020 and early 2021, that was our predominant way of sales. But now I would say it's maybe 1 in 50 that are more comfortable in the Zoom format. But to be very candid and honest, the Zoom format then very often translates to them coming into the store afterwards. And if we have to make specific protocols in place or things so that they feel comfortable, we do. But there's something to an engagement ring, no matter how many pictures you look at, no matter how many slides or articles you read, seeing it on your hand is a very personal experience. And it's one that I think is crucial to making sure that it's a ring that you will love for a lifetime.
1 in 50 Zoom appointments is very interesting because I see virtual appointments promoted so much, which I mean, I think is fantastic that people are showing that they have options for everyone, but it's also really telling that people kind of maybe think of those as a last resort type of scenario.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so let's talk figures a little bit. So Shelley, I'm curious, I look forward to the Knott's different surveys so much each year. And what was the average engagement ring spend in 2021?
So the average engagement ring spend was $6,000, which is up from 2020 because it dipped slightly into like the 5,900 territory, I want to say. But it was also in 2019 was steady at 6,000. So now we're right back up to 6,000 again. And keep in mind, this is obviously a national average. So it changes drastically by region. And there's a huge spread across there. There's a huge range, but the average is 6,000.
Okay. Is that kind of in line with what you see, Alexis?
I would say our average ticket for engagement rings is a little higher. It's usually between about 7 and 10. But I think that kind of skews to the fact that California is California. It's a higher cost of living and we've got a lot of .comers. So I think that extra added amount makes sense considering the market.
Yeah, absolutely. With those rents, they might have some budget for engagement rings too. And then I wanted to get the lab grown diamond question kind of out of the way early. And we did receive some questions prior to the webinar with people asking about lab growns as well. So I think it's nice to just kind of address it right away since it's always a hot topic. So I'm curious about how prevalent lab growns are in the market right now in terms of consumer interest. Like how much are we seeing couples and shoppers come in and ask about them?
Well, I can say on the sales floor, it's accelerated pretty rapidly. Again, I add the asterisk of we're based here in San Francisco, and we've got a lot of players in our market that have been doing lab grown for quite a while. But I will say pretty much post-COVID was when we really saw this huge upswing in the consumer asking. Our numbers just kind of in loose tracking. We went from 1 in 10 to 1 in 5, and now we're at about 1 in 2. And it's not
Asking
necessarily
about lab growns.
Yep. Or it's a topic of conversation, or what is this thing that I'm hearing of, or what is a lab grown versus earth grown diamond versus moissanite versus some of these other simulants out there. There's a lot of consumer confusion about what a lab grown diamond actually is. And I think that stems from there's so many different terms that are being used across the industry and all over the internet. And a lot of times that 1 and 2 is just kind of understanding what it is and how it differentiates from a natural diamond. And then of course the conversation about price and is it more eco-friendly. I think there's just a very confused consumer out there right now. And we look at our role on the sales floor as to helping educate them. It's not my job to tell them what they should or shouldn't buy, but as long as they have all the pertinent information and the answers to the questions they have, it's up to them to make their own decision.
Do you feel people are motivated more by the eco-friendly aspect or the price point aspect?
I think it's pretty evenly split. I think, we have a very conscious mindset here in the Bay Area in general, very much like a lot of places all over the country. So I think that there's a good portion of people that are interested kind of in the eco-friendly side. And of course, that comes with an education of both sides of the coin with both lab grown and natural. And then there's people that are keeping up with the Joneses. They just want a big rock on their finger. I think there's, especially the couples that shop together, are a little bit more pragmatic and don't necessarily care that much about the romance of a natural diamond. And they're making a decision based on, so what, it doesn't have value in the long term. I want a big sparkly rock on my finger. And my opinion is there's no shame in that game. So do you.
So if a couple is interested, would Padis source the lab grown diamond that they're looking for?
Yeah, and we actually carry it as well. Again, it's not my job to tell the consumer what they should buy or what they need to buy. As long as our view is we are completely transparent with everything we do. And in terms of making the decision, that's up to the consumer.
Okay. And Shelley, can you speak a bit to the knots coverage of lab grown diamonds and kind of how much of a dent is it making in the conversation with bridal consumers?
Yeah, so in our 2021 survey, we found that nearly 1 in 4 engagement rings featured a center stone that was man-made, which is up 11% in just 2 years, which is a pretty significant shift because our data points tend to move pretty slowly because engagement ring trends tend to change pretty slowly, right, over time. So an 11% jump in just 2 years is pretty significant for us. And yeah, very similar to Alexis's points, we find that it is most likely both a budgetary and a sustainability concern motivating consumers to kind of, look into this relatively new, option for engagement ring center stones.
Okay. Alexis, I have one follow-up question for you. Sorry to put you on the spot, but so we said that about 1 in 4 customers will ask about a lab grown diamond. Do we know about how many will purchase?
Once fully, and I don't mean to use the word educated in like a derogatory way, but once they have all the information, once there's clarification, I would say, we haven't sold a lucrative amount. We've sold a good amount, but it's definitely, once the consumer understands that it's more the technological side of things that go down in value, like flat screen TVs, rather than a natural diamond that has this intrinsic value and this natural rarity and, a very, very strong story about how many economies that are relying on the natural diamond trade being there and how important that is to places like Botswana. The consumer makes up their own mind, but by and large, we do a lot of times, even though they're asking about it, by and large, they tend to end up with a natural diamond.
Okay, very interesting, because that's obviously a huge discrepancy if you're thinking, wait, 1 in 4, but then you think the reality of the sale, maybe not as many. It's still very interesting to just keep your finger on and kind of watch the trend evolve and move. So going into style a little bit, yellow gold has really come up and just, was so out for a long period of time. And now it's really become very common in the bridal space. So what are we seeing right now with metals? Kind of what are consumers preferring? And I'll start with you, Shelley, for this one.
Oh, great. Yeah, so we find that white gold is still the most popular metal at 45%, but it is slowly declining. And yes, to your point, yellow gold is quickly making a comeback. And we've seen an 11% increase since just 2017. So yes, yellow gold definitely on the rise and white gold slowly on the decline. And
what about platinum? Is that still a major choice?
We see like platinum, has a smaller percentage, but it still is holding strong for its percentage. It's not really moving very much.
Okay, interesting. And what about you, Alexis?
I can sit here as a yellow gold bride. So I can definitely speak to the fact that I love yellow gold. But it's definitely on the sales floor something that we are seeing a lot more of, for a store that had most of our inventory in either white gold or platinum. It definitely took some reshifting around of things. And, for us, it really started fashion jewelry in yellow became huge very, very quickly. And then kind of true to form, then comes the engagement rings to kind of match whatever jewelry they wear on a regular basis. And we've seen a huge, huge uptick in yellow gold. We do see rose gold actually before yellow gold kind of became large. And then that's kind of trickled down to a much smaller subset of what people are asking for. But I'm with Shelley, white gold and platinum are king and queen, and yellow gold is quickly making its way up there.
Okay, great. And then, all right, so, and you are newly engaged. Congratulations. So you chose yellow gold, and I'm curious, what diamond shape did you choose? And which diamond shapes are the most popular right now?
I happened to choose a pear shape. It was a stone that we had in our inventory for about 30 years or so, and I've had my eye on it for a long time. It was set in a pendant, and when my now fiance was asking, I was like, I've got the stone, don't worry about it. But in terms of what's popular in shape on the sales floor, round is still our primary selling shape, especially for people, engineers and guys that are super into light performance and diamond refraction. There's nothing better than the beauty of a 000 diamond, perfectly cut stone. But we kind of put our engagement groups into two separate groups. There's kind of the classic, and then there's a group that wants to be anything but. And that anything but category, we've seen hexagons, marquise are back, pear shapes, go down the list. The world is your oyster in diamond shapes. And, while round tends to be the primary shape, ovals are just underneath it in terms of our sales, and then pretty much every other shape. We don't discriminate here on shape in any way, shape, or form.
And what about you, Shelley? What about the knots insights on diamond shapes?
Yeah, so everything Alexis is saying perfectly tracks with what we found as well. So round remains the most popular cut. About 41% respondents had a round diamond. However, oval is growing really quickly, and it's up 19% from 2015. So another kind of huge jump. And we kind of think that that's because oval still feels super classic. Like it's not a risk, like say a hexagon or even like a marquee would be, which remain, in the pretty low percentage for us. But it still feels different. It's elongated. It still feels a little bit edgy, but it is also timeless.
Okay. And it feels, I was trying to just think to myself, what is not popular, and I feel like the princess is the only one that comes to mind.
Yes.
Not that it's unpopular, but that maybe it's declined in recent years.
It is. Yeah, it's actually the only diamond shape we have found that is actively declining over the years.
Because a cushion, I feel like, is still really timeless. Yep. Like I'll still see a cushion a lot. Alexis, Have you seen that with the princess?
It's funny, we thought that, and then as soon as we stopped having a ton of princess cuts in inventory, all of a sudden there was this princess run in both lab and natural. It's one of those things where as a jeweler, I don't love princess cuts because of those exposed corners, which are far more prone to breakage. So purely from the jeweler side of things, I don't love them, but they're very much as a consumer for them. But I think ovals have replaced princess cuts as kind of that next tier of popularity. Okay. And, and I've now put princess cuts more in the same category as emeralds, hearts, anything other than ovals or rounds, which are super duper hot still.
Okay. And then as far as the style, what the styles of settings, what is really trending right now? Are we seeing halos more on the upswing or the downswing? And ditto with solitaires, 3 stones, eternity band styles. What's kind of trending overall for those?
Shelley, I'll let you give the hard statistics on that.
Great. I love my stats. Yeah, so we found that solitaire prong settings are the most popular, coming in at 35%, and halo settings follow at 19%. However, halos are down 7% since 2017. So at least according to our survey, they are on the downswing, which is, actually kind of not surprising. Just in my own market work, I've kind of found more of an emphasis now on the solitaire and the 3 stone, and even Twine-Moi 2 stone rings. And I've myself, just in my own, like, anecdotally, have seen halos kind of fall by the wayside. So that tracks for us.
It feels like a little more emphasis on the metal too. I think a diamond shank will never go out of style, all of that sparkle, but I'm just seeing less of it maybe. Whereas a few years ago, it was just sort of like about the more little diamonds you can get on your ring, the better.
Yes.
And what about you, Alexis?
Well, I sit here with a yellow gold solitaire, so I can definitely speak to that as well. And I would say at least 50% of our rings right now being sold are a solitaire of some form. There is, again, kind of the overarching buckets that we put our clients into and kind of understanding things, but there's a lot of gray area. There's that classic client that wants the solitaire or the basic diamonds down the shank, or 3 stone or Twine-Moi. And then there's a client that wants nothing at all traditional or like that. But what I love and what I like to kind of help express to our clients is the stacking element, which has been so huge over the last few years, whether it be right hand rings, whether it be stacking necklaces, earrings, go down the list. I think the move towards solitaire rings echoes the kind of the deformality of our society. It's there's an ease of wear. It's a little bit more casual, but then you can bling it up with a ton of fabulous bands and really make it unique and specific to the client and kind of funk it up in whatever the way they want. And that solitaire offers that carte blanche where they can pretty much do anything with it. They can do a pointy band, they can do a wide band, they can do a million different things. So it really gives that utility and flexibility that a lot of today's consumers are after, because they want to be able to dress it up or dress it down.
Yes. And that versatility is so great because it means that feeling of stowing everything away for the big occasion is less relevant. And, just wearing it more feels wearing and mixing and matching and having that kind of dressed down, but also sort of glammed up with your jewels look is kind of just more relevant than ever.
We're all eager to dress up again, but there's still rare opportunities to do so. So we either have to do it by a Zoom call or, wait for those occasions to come up and start stacking.
Yes, totally. And then for center stones, what are we seeing for the average diamond carat weight? Just anecdotally, I've heard retailers talk about customers looking for bigger stones, specifically in the last 2 years during this jewelry boom of the pandemic. So I don't know if this is kind of just specific to a certain part of the economy doing well during the pandemic and spending more on jewelry, or if this is just an overall trend that the consumer is looking for more than a 1 carat diamond today. Do you have any info on this, Shelley?
Actually, I don't. I think because we're working with a national average, and so our national spend is lower, like we don't have the data that backs up a larger carat weight, but I'm very interested to know what Alexis has to say about this because she's with people in real time.
I think there's very much this YOLO attitude out there right now where people are like, we've been cooped up, we haven't been able to go out, life's short, let's celebrate, and if we're going to get a ring, let's go all out. And that seems, it's a blast to be out on the sales floor right now because that attitude is, it's one that not only is fun to be around, it's also contagious. And I think that, my opinion, and this is not statistics based, but I think that kind of attitude is what's generating the larger center stone. Life is short. Why wait for the upgrade?
So what kind of sizes are you seeing? In a typical day, what would be the sizes that people are maybe interested in when they're coming in to look?
Right now, carat and a half has always kind of been that comfort zone. Again, I add the asterisk that this is a San Francisco market, and you've got the .com money, so it's not the norm by any means. But we've definitely seen that uptick towards the 2 carat, and even larger stones that we would have had in our inventory for a really long time, and those the 7, 8, 9, 10 carats are starting to move, and it's definitely, it's wonderful, but it's eye-opening that attitude is out there, that people are like, hey, life's short, let's spend some money.
Very interesting. I think almost a 1.5 carat being the norm is almost maybe in just another state like the 1 carat, the equivalent of the 1 carat, because a lot of jewelers are talking about just customers looking for like now a bit bigger than the 1 carat, which might be the equivalent for the 1.5 for you guys. Going on to unique engagement rings, I'm curious if there are any trends that both of you have been noticing. So in terms of alternative center stones that are trending, or doing different things like bands that don't really have a center stone, like just a couple of like diamond eternity bands, or like, are there any particularly interesting things that you guys have seen?
Yeah, so alternative center stones are definitely trending. We find that the top 3 are sapphire, morganite, and moissanite, followed by, which is actually pretty surprising, aquamarine. Because I don't tend to think of aquamarine as a typical engagement ring center stone, but I think it has that kind of something blue tie-in, and also it tends to be a little bit less expensive than some other, more precious gems. So alternative center stones, color definitely trending. And as well as, at least anecdotally, interesting settings. So whether they be antique settings that feel super one of a kind, or the trois et moi that we've kind of discussed, that we're seeing a lot of celebrities like jump on this bandwagon. And even just statement bands. And we were talking about stackables earlier, right-hand rings, bands that are standalone with no center stone. It kind of is just anything goes right now. There seems to be this overarching theme of maximalism, like more is more.
Which is very fun to write about, or for you to style too, because you style in your editorials. So I'm sure fun to sell. Like there's a lot to work with for all of us who kind of work in the different parts of the industry.
Yes, absolutely.
And what about you, Alexis?
It makes me feel good that I can completely echo what Shelley is saying. For us, other than a diamond or a lab-grown diamond, blue sapphires for us are kind of the primary second option, followed by anything that's champagne or light pink, which for us is also sapphires and morganite. We do our best to take away people from the beryl categories, no emeralds, no aquamarines, but if the client wants that, we have to make sure that we build either a nice halo around it or a bezel or something to protect the stone, because of course, if we're wearing it all day, every day, it's not necessarily durable enough to withstand that day in, day out impact. So in cases where there are engagement rings with perhaps a softer color stone, we see a lot of big eternity bands being purchased, or things where you've got a standalone wedding band that if you're not happening to wear your engagement ring, you've got something substantial to wear as well.
Okay, cool. And then also we've touched on this slightly, but Megan Fox had such a great moment with her 2-stone ring. I mean, that was just such a great celebrity jewelry moment to start off 2022. I think that's going to be hard to top in terms of a unique style. But in the past just few years altogether, are there any trends that you two have noticed in the celebrity engagement world, or pieces that you think have influenced the consumer market at all, or just any personal favorites of rings?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting, at least what I have noticed, is that I think in the past, celebrity engagement rings tended to be really large solitaire stones, like the biggest emerald cut diamond you'd ever seen, right? And now I think we're tending to see these highly personalized, more customized, even edgier engagement rings kind of come into the mainstream. So Megan Fox is a great example of this. I loved Ariana Grande's pearl and oval diamond trois et moi ring. You know, and it's really surprising to see Toi Moi, these 2-stone rings kind of take off the way that they have, because they are so kind of unusual and unique. And I also loved Katy Perry's ruby with the floral halo. I thought that was really interesting, and not necessarily like the biggest stone you've ever seen, but something that felt really ornate and kind of personal to her.
I completely forgot about hers. Thank you for
Yeah.
mentioning that. Yeah, she had a stunning colored gemstone. I remember that. I'm curious, and Emma Stone had a pearl.
Just a pearl, yes.
And engagement ring. And I remember just jewelry people talking a lot about hers and Ariana Grande's, and just saying pearls aren't good for everyday wear because of washing your hands. I would love to see if they wear them daily or not.
They can afford to have somebody walk their hand around for them. So I don't worry about them as much, but
wash my hands.
in a bubble, it's fine. But from the jeweler side of things, I still get heart palpitations every time I see that. If I get a client coming in asking for it, because of course it's just not meant for something that you wear all day, every day, unless you happen to be a celebrity and can have somebody either maintain it for you daily or wear it for you daily, or just walk your hand around so that it doesn't take any kind of impact or any kind of moisture. But that's, I also have to laugh. The Megan Fox ring, I don't know if you guys have heard that when she takes it off, it hurts her, or there's some kind of mechanism in there that stabs her finger when she goes to take off her ring, which
Yeah, I know that got some negative PR. I guess there are thorns in it that if she tries to take it off, it's painful. I don't know. Very edgy non-brand for this couple.
Yes.
You know, if a little bit toxic and problematic. But a beautiful ring, just visually.
Are people asking you about 2-stone rings, Alexis, or not so much?
Not yet. I think, you know, it takes a little while for things to become enough of a trend where people start asking for it. But I've definitely seen it on some of the predominant engagement ring Instagrams that, you know, 2-stone rings are very, very popular, at least being shown as such. My personal favorite, I saw this at JCK, Rahmaninoff does a triple threat where they actually did 3 stones, and it was 3 3-carat stones, which it was just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. And I hope that's a trend, but I also have to acknowledge that it takes quite a budget for that to be a trend, because not only do you have to buy 1 center stone, you have to buy 2 or 3. So I think while the trend is wonderful and fingers crossed it does work, I think the general consumer will probably just stick to 1 stone for now.
I mean, on a practical level, it makes a lot of sense, of course. Okay, well, I think that's it for me. Thank you, ladies, so much. Is there anything else you want to mention before we turn it over to audience questions?
Ready?
I'm sure they'll have plenty for us, so no problem. Well, thank you so much, and I will turn it over to Michelle now.
Thank you so much, Ashley, Shelley, and Alexis. That was a really interesting discussion. I'm a big fan of the Toi Moi. Personally, I'm just going to throw that in there. And I also, too, really like Megan Fox's engagement ring minus the thorn part. So just as a reminder to our audience members, you still have time to drop questions into the Zoom Q&A. I'm going to give people a few minutes to come up with any more questions they might have while I share a word from our sponsor and Royal Chain. Since 1978, Royal Chain has been the industry source for gold jewelry. Experience a diverse product selection, strong values, and excellent service Royal Chain offers retail partners. Pre-order the newest releases from their spring 2022 collection now at royalchain.com. Now let's get started with our listener questions. We had a lot of questions come in beforehand and a lot come in while everyone was talking. One that I thought was really interesting, Ashley, to start the webinar, you mentioned that there are going to be a record number of weddings today. The Knot has noted this, and the Wedding Report has noted this. Are there any trends to note as to the types of jewelry brides are wearing on their wedding day? And, you know, any other events leading up to the wedding day, the bachelorette party, the bridal shower, etc. And I don't know, Shelley, if you have any data on that, but Alexis, you might have thoughts on if you see brides, what brides are buying for their wedding day, and also, I don't know, groom's gifts, that kind of thing. Because I think there's definitely an opportunity here with all these weddings for jewelers to be selling more than engagement rings and bands?
Yes, so our survey focuses on engagement rings and wedding bands only, unfortunately, and not bridal jewelry in general. So I'm very interested, Alexis, if you have insight into this. I can tell you anecdotally, I've noticed that, tennis bracelets are having a moment. Statement earrings are pretty consistent. What we call pearl core, so an interest in modern pearls and, kind of non-traditional pearl jewelry is trending, at least, from what we've seen in our market. But I'm curious what Alexis has to say.
Okay, Alexis?
Again, echoes very closely to what Shelley said. Diamond classics, whether it be a diamond pendant, diamond earrings, diamond tennis bracelet, that tends to be a very popular day of gift from the groom to the bride or from the bride to the bride. And then there's also parent gifts that kind of fall into those same categories. I think one of the unfortunate transitions of our industry is it's gone away from suites of jewelry where, a lady would have a suite of rubies and a suite of emeralds and sets of jewelry, kind of following with what's going on in the world and the informality that's kind of been happening. People want diamond classic staples and pieces of jewelry that have important meaning and sentiment to them. And there's no more important day in someone's life than their wedding day. So having a diamond pendant that was gifted to them on their wedding day has become very popular. My fiance is trying to start something called engagement watches, which I'm not sure if that's going to catch on, but every guy I've talked to thinks it's a great idea. So gifting watches on the wedding day to a gentleman. And we do field a lot of questions about whether jewelry can be rented for a wedding day, which is something that we're considering. And there's companies that are out there doing it, especially for more of the statement pieces, statement earrings, things that can't necessarily be worn every day. Those are questions that we're getting pretty regularly.
Yeah, that's really
so interesting that sorry, Michelle, that's so interesting that you mentioned that, Alexis, because I just noticed one company that is now kind of running a program where if you buy your engagement ring from them, that you can borrow jewelry from them for your wedding day. So that is a really interesting kind of little trend to know. We'll see how big that becomes.
Interested on the legal side of things, how it all goes down if something gets lost or who knows what. But something we all have to consider because, especially if it's on a staple piece, hey, it still gets photographed, and if it's on an influencer, that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, very true. And I think anytime too, you can just make a customer happy. It's good for the long run. They might come back and buy something else. And good luck to your fiance with the man engagement watch. Is that what it is? I think it's a great idea.
Making that a thing.
So we had a couple questions here that kind of relate to Alexis. This is going to be you again, but Shelley, you can jump in if you want to. We had a couple questions about brick and mortar best practices kind of for brick and mortar retailers still to be competing with online retailers and kind of building on when people come in and interact with you online first. How do you kind of convert that to a sale?
It's a tough one. Best practices, I can't necessarily claim to know. I can tell you what we hope our best practice is. The whole concept of omni-channel. If somebody sees something on your website, you need to have it in store for them to see it, touch it, try on. And just doing everything you can. People are all at very different comfort zones with how they want to be interacted with. And best matching the consultant that they're working with the personality type really helps kind of bridge that gap. The difference between a brick and mortar location and an online location is that personal relationship. It's the confidence in knowing if something were to go wrong, you know where to find them. They're not just going to turn off their website one day. So there is, to me, a big advantage to independent retailers, especially, the independent retailer that's involved in the community, where that's the differentiating point. So the importance on the sales floor, telling that story to make sure the consumer understands that there's so much more than just a transaction. This is a lifelong relationship, and it's one that when you need your ring size or your ring clean, you want to have that person-to-person connection so that it's comfortable from, today's date till the end of time.
And I think also, another advantage is you mentioned a couple of times during the webinar, Alexis, the education you provide. When they come in asking about lab grown versus natural. Like, I think a lot of people now, with so much information available on the internet, I think people have kind of like gone back to like, I just want to ask one person who knows, rather than sit here and Google it for 5 hours and get 100 different answers.
With their own different biases. That's the hardest part of the internet is everybody that's writing something is getting compensated for a click one way or another. And it's a very hard message to relay to the consumer who's already so confused and so concerned already that they're going to get ripped off. And you're 100% right, Michelle, that connection and that human element really helps kind of bridge that gap.
Shelley, did you want to add something?
No, I completely agree with everything you said. And I think it's so funny too, when, to your point, when you look up, when you try to do your own research online, it's like, it's either the worst decision of your life or the best decision of your life. There's, you know, there's kind of no in between. So definitely that in-person interaction has to be helpful, just as kind of a gut check for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we had a question. I know we got to this earlier, but we had a couple questions about lab-grown diamonds. And I'm going to ask this one just to get, someone once said, it would be interesting to hear opinions on the future of lab-created diamonds as they relate to the bridal industry. You know, Shelley, you noted no growth in the knot survey in man-made stones in general, moissanite and lab-grown diamonds. And Alexis, you noted that a lot of more people ask, but they kind of go for the natural. Oh, where do you see it going from here? Like what position are these going to occupy in the bridal market in 5 years, say? Too hard to say?
Yeah, it's kind of anyone's guess. I think more and more, I see a lot of jewelers pivoting to offer both natural and lab grown that historically did not in the past. And I wonder if that will continue to be kind of a growing trend, kind of letting the consumer choose. But it's hard to know if this is a trend that's really hot right now, and then, you know, the kind of the resale value and the sustainability question of whether or not it is actually more sustainable, and what are the long-term impacts if those kind of points become more important in the future. It's tough to know, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just in general, it's tough to make any kind of predictions right now about anything. Alexis, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the discomfort from the retailer side has to do with value and with the volatility of pricing. At some point, there's going to be a bottoming out of sorts where, you know, right now, my biggest gripe is that I feel as though my consumer is perhaps paying the R&D costs for a lot of these lab-grown diamond manufacturers that are eventually going to come down, which we know. But there's still a cost of, you know, cutting the goods and paying the cutters, and the make is incredibly important in lab-grown because it is a completely commoditized product in that 1 carat DVS2 is a 1 carat DVS2 is a 1 carat DVS2, unlike natural diamonds where there's this intrinsic rarity and I can't just grow another one. So if you happen to fall in love with the stone, you need to buy it now. There's no pressure to buy because, hey, you can just buy another diamond that matches the specs in the lab grown category. I think once the pricing levels out a little bit, I think we'll all feel more comfortable, but the same can be said for the natural market right now. There's just a lot of volatility and a lot of variables in the world right now that are making it a very uncomfortable place already for the retail jeweler in terms of loose. And then the lab grown component just adds this whole other element that I think a lot of retailers just don't even want to acknowledge because there's just a lot of concern about where the value is going. And I don't want to invest in something that's going to be worthless in, a few months or a few years.
All right. Thank you very much. We had a suggestion for the man's engagement watch, the man watchment that came in from one of our listeners. So thank you very much. We will put that on the list. And then a question from the same listener. Are you seeing more stones being set in men's bridal? Which I think is an interesting question because there's definitely a lot of chatter in the industry about men getting more into jewelry. And we have more men, certainly at least on the red carpet, wearing things that would be, wouldn't have been considered, quote, men's jewelry 10 or even 5 years ago. So what about men's bridal? Is it getting kind of more blingy, so to speak?
I can say from the sales floor side, absolutely. And it's a lot of fun to see men kind of embrace jewelry as, watches tended to be their only accessory that they could express themselves. And as the watch market has gone so crazy, I think they're all looking for alternatives. You're seeing professional athletes wear pearl necklaces. You're seeing men's bands with more diamonds. We're selling a ton more of diamond men's wedding rings than we did in the past. And it's a combination of maybe from the top, they're not super visible, but there's diamonds on the profile or on the inside of the ring, or it's black diamonds, or maybe a color stone representing birthstones. We're definitely seeing more of it. And I think it's wonderful that men get this other accessory to start expressing themselves with. And it's great for business as well, but it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Shelley. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, in my own market work, I get pitched way more blinged out men's rings, lapel pins, even pearl necklaces. Nothing makes me happier than Harry Styles and pearls. Like, let's be real. And even the unisex market I've found has become so much more prevalent. I get pitched so many, bands that come in both women's and men's sizing. And I think, as we kind of look at how Gen Z looks at gender and future generations look at gender, and they look at it as, way less binary than generations have in the past, I think this will become even more of a prevalent trend. This kind of, what is traditionally masculine and traditionally feminine kind of becomes blurred.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. What about kind of, we know Tiffany introduced a man's engagement ring. I really liked it too. And speaking of unisex, I feel like they could have just said, this is an engagement ring for anybody and sold a ton of them. But do you see any kind of interest? I mean, kind of piggybacking off this questions about stones being set in men's bridal. What about engagement rings for men? Is that something that's picked up at all? Or do you think Tiffany's introduction has moved the needle at all in that market? Do men ever ask about them?
In our world, yes, but we don't necessarily view it in the same way. Like, we don't look at it as a men's engagement ring. It's a men's band. Some of them that have a larger center stone. My dad happens to be one that wears a quite large center stone in his wedding band. It's in a traditional mindset. There's an engagement ring and a wedding band on the female end, and on the men's end, there's a men's band. And we're seeing a lot more larger stones and requests for larger stones, which I think is fantastic. I love anything bezel set. I love anything moon set, and some of the Tiffany stuff that's come out is just stunning and so handsome. And, it's great to see men starting to embrace it. Diamonds are good for everybody.
That's amazing. Well, thank you both so much. We're out of questions for today, but I wanted to let everyone know that National Jeweler will be back again next Tuesday, February 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Associate Editor News Lenore Fido will be interviewing strategist Deanna McIntosh, the founder of Retail Evolving, about the retail trends to track in 2022. I'm going to drop that link to register in the chat right now. Anybody wants to sign up, they can join us then. And before we sign off today, I want to say thank you again to Ashley for hosting. Thank you to our guests, Alexis and Shelley, and thanks again to our sponsor, Royal Chain. Everyone, please take care. Bye-bye.